All right. I'm Greg Berman. This is
Rabbi Teller.
Rabbi Teller. And today we're going to talk about perfection.
Ooh, scary
perfection.
Concept there.
And you know what? It's almost apropos that it took me like an hour and a half to set up the shot today because I was
trying to make it perfect,
seeking perfection.
But let me tell you something. Would I be screwing up the episode if I give the punchline now?
No, do your thing.
It doesn't exist.
What?
It doesn't exist.
No, it's actually good to give the punchline right away
now.
at the beginning.
So now everything else kind of will flow.
Right. They have to follow the journey of how do we get to perfection doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist.
Perfection doesn't exist. I mean, the shots do look great. Although, you know what? Here's the thing. Here's why it doesn't exist. Because no matter how long I took to do all of this, I'm sure that on the other end of this, when I'm looking at the footage later, I'll be like, well, but there's something I could have.
But not that we're looking at one aspect. You're looking at the cameras, and do the cameras need to be exactly perfect? But let's say, what is going to make this episode work, Greg? What is going to make this episode flow? What's going to make this episode, as we'd say, have the vibe?
The unintentional, beautiful moments. It's
living
not,
in the moment.
Right. It's not
having
about
a
the camera.
relationship between you and myself is what's going to ultimately create the magic.
But what if these leaves aren't perfectly displayed towards the camera? What if my pants have a stain that everyone can't stop looking at, Rabbi? Then what?
Then
can't I control everything?
Absolutely not.
Tell me more about that.
Okay. So what should the framework be, Greg? I think should we talk about perfection in reference to dating? Should we talk about perfection in reference to the relationship that I'm in with my marriage? Should we talk about perfection? These leaves need to be exactly where they need. Like what direction should we go?
Let's start broad. Let's think about the idea of perfection from the top, right? Because I think perfection permeates down to everything in life. Perfectionism is such a common thing that people complain about. Oh, I'm such a perfectionist. In fact, I feel like perfectionist is one of those things that when you're in a job interview and they're like, tell us something about yourself that, you don't like. And everyone's like, I'm such a perfectionist. I just want to do everything well. It's such a humble, braggy way of answering that question.
If I were to, what is perfection? Let's start there. What does perfect even mean? What is the idea of perfectionism even mean? If I had to ask you the definition of perfectionism or perfect, what do you think that means? Maybe we can pull out Google right now, or we can pull out ChatGPT.
Google it,
but if I were to ask you, what do you think perfect means?
I would say, if I'm gonna make a flash definition for it, I would say devoid of criticism. I guess that's how I see it, because so much of my life is about, art, and art is such a hard thing to perfect because there's no way that art should look. Art should look any way, right? So for me, when I look at something that I've created and I'm trying to determine if it's perfect, for me, it's like, can I criticize this thing that I've made? Okay. Is this devoid of criticism? But the problem is that it's only that's a temporal thing. Sometimes it's devoid of criticism in that moment, but I look at that a week later, having learned a week's worth of items, right. And now it's no longer perfect. And it's always subjective too.
It's always subjective. So if I can add to your definition.
Yeah.
I'll
allow it.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Perfect inherently means without flaw.
So that is different than without criticism.
Right. So I would say if something is perfect, therefore there is no flaw to it. Devoid of flaw means flaw inherently means there's something wrong with it. So perfect means there's something it's devoid of not having something wrong with it. And it could be in the eyes of the beholder, and objectively there is no flaw to it.
Is there anything that you would think, if I were to say, name a perfect thing?
Would you allow me to be a rabbi for 1 minute?
Oh, please. I was wondering when the Jewish wisdom would come in. What does the Torah say about perfection?
So there's only one perfect being in our existence.
Me.
And you, Greg.
And Justin Timberlake.
And Justin Timberlake, yes. Me, Mordechai Teller, Rabbi Mordechai Teller.
And Justin Timberlake.
Those are the only two perfect things.
Not as of late. Didn't you just get arrested for like a DUI or something?
Yes, but we'll let
let that slide. Rabbi's looking the other way on the DUI.
We'll let that slide.
Crimea River was so good that he gets one DUI, and that's it.
God, the concept of a God, the one and only God. In Judaism, we believe that there is one God, monotheistic God, not multiple gods. And this is the only perfect entity in the concept of our world. Everything else, even Justin Timberlake,
even Justin Timberlake
is flawed.
But we're created in the image of God. Why didn't God make us perfect too?
Great question. We are created in the image of God, but we are trying to live our life for the 120 years that we have on this planet to perfect ourselves.
Halavai, 120 years. I would love that.
Halavai. You should be able to do the squats you were doing earlier at 120.
Don't reveal my secrets. Squats before the episode.
We believe that we are here to perfect ourselves and better ourselves, become more self-aware, become more self-actualized, try to get as close to perfection as possible, even though we are never, ever, ever going to touch or really accrue true perfection. But every minute of our life is to try to grow, become a better version of yourself, to try to connect to the ultimate perfection, to have a relationship with the ultimate perfection, which in fact is God himself.
I've always thought that actually. That's really interesting you say that. I used to always believe, I don't remember when it was, but I determined that I am always the best version of myself that I have ever been and the worst version of myself that I will ever be.
Okay.
I always think about it like that because at any given moment, I have the most experience that I've ever had. So if you look at my life or who I am,
freeze frame your life.
Freeze frame my life. Everything in the past, I am better than everything in the past, no matter what choices I've made.
Correct.
Whether they're right or wrong,
correct.
I'm still better because I've learned something, hopefully. That's my life. And I'm always striving to learn something, even from my bad choices.
What is our purpose here in this world? Why are we created? Just to walk around life aimlessly? I wake up in the morning and I go from 6 a.m. to 12 p.m., same cycle over and over and over again. As we'd say, that's a chaval. That's a pity. If we're not aspiring for greater depth, greater meaning, greater perfection, greater connection. And as you just said very nicely, if I freeze frame my life, okay, I was good. What's the next second going to bring me? What's the next minute going to bring me? What did I learn from this moment? What did I aspire to become in that next minute of life? Hopefully more connection to something greater, something that will permeate just the here and the now, but something that will go for all eternity. That's what we believe. And it's hard because I can't touch God like this. I can't do this to God. God is not in the here and the now, but
it depends on your definition of God. I mean, I would argue that everything is God.
It's not tangible. Right? I can't do this to God, but I believe that God is here with me.
Yeah.
And that nothing is by chance. And
I agree with that.
And everything hopefully has a deeper reason, a deeper purpose, a deeper motive that will get me to become a more connected, altruistic being.
So more perfect.
So more perfect. So
more aligned with the best version of you. So it's almost as if perfection Because we talked about that earlier, this idea of how it's temporal as well. So it's almost as if perfection is aligning yourself with the best version of what you can be in this moment. So to be perfect is to be aligned with the most altruistically good version of you at the time you're aligning it.
Exactly. And you know what? Be accepting of that.
Right.
Being okay with that.
Even if it's not perfect in a objective manner.
Because the only thing which is perfect in the world
of perfection,
is God.
Right.
And he created this to be offline or this to be like this. And then at that moment, how do I respond to what's happening in the here and the now? And that, we say, could potentially be an incredible growth opportunity, an incredible opportunity for me to connect to how can I be more present, or how can I be more of a better listener. And
how much of the Jewish religion, so I know that being present, being aware is a big part of the spiritual practice of like Buddhism and, you know, the meditation and all of that stuff. What does Judaism have to say about like being present and being aware? I know that in my deep Jewish education, I can say that the one thing that I've ever heard where Judaism talks about being present in the moment is during prayer, right? Because you say the same prayers every single day, and, you know, after years and years of saying the same exact words every single day, it's easy to just kind of let the words just kind of spill out of your face and not think about what it is that those words mean. And so that's one place where I've heard of the idea of being present, being aware in the moment is during prayer. Is that kind of the main space where that's addressed, or is there more of that? Because I'm curious. I love the idea of like a Jewish concept of awareness and presence.
I'm going to answer your question by asking another question.
Classic rabbi move.
If we believe that God created us, and therefore God knows every single need that you and I have, so why then do I need to pray to God? If God knows everything that I need, why would I need to pray to him and say, God, I need this. God, I need that. God, help me here. God, help me there. God created you. He's supposed to be present with you every second of your day and the way. Do you think he needs you to say to him, God, I need it? Like, we look at God as our Father in heaven. Your father, your parent knows who you are. Your parent knows what you need. So therefore, what is the whole purpose of me praying?
I'm going to answer that question I
have an answer, but
by giving you an answer.
Good.
I think it's interesting that you phrase it that way. You're saying that if God already knows what we need, why do we pray? The first thing I want to say about that is it almost seems as though prayer is asking for things, which I'm not sure if I believe that. Granted, I don't know all of the prayers, and I don't know what they actually mean. A lot of times I'm just saying Hebrew words and going, that one sounds nice. But I think the reason we pray is not to ask God for things. I think the reason we pray is to remind ourselves of what we want. Because if you do that every single day, you're only crystallizing in your mind what it is that you're streaming, what you're trying to go towards. For example, I love making a wish on 11/11 every day. I don't know why. I'm a very superstitious person. I'm not sure
why.
You're
Russian.
That could be it, and also I'm very anxious, so that could play into it too. It's like, if I don't do this, I'm gonna die. But on 11/11, if I catch it, I always stop whatever I'm doing and I make a wish. Which seems like such a silly thing for like...
When you wish upon a clock. Yes.
But I do it because there was a time when I thought about it. I was like, why am I doing this? And I realized that, is it so wrong that sometimes, maybe twice in a day, I take a moment to reflect on what it is that I want most out of life right now? Is that so bad?
Good.
That's a great thing.
Good. Amazing. Greg, Rabbi Greg.
Hey, Rabbi Greg.
You've now been.
That's what this is. It's just a training course for
So you're right.
rabbinical knowledge.
What is prayer? Prayer is an opportunity to create an awareness. It's an opportunity to create a being present, and it's a way to align who you are and what your hopes, your dreams, and your connection is in this world.
It's like manifestation.
It's manifestation, because at the end of the day, thank God I've been married 15 years.
Represent. I don't know.
If I just gave my wife enough attention to get her to like me and then accept my proposal to marry me, and therefore that moment afterwards never put an ounce of giving attention, communication to the relationship.
At that point, you're doing what we're talking about. You're just saying words, right?
I'm just
you're
saying
praying
words
without intention.
And there's no intention. And you know what? When I give to my relationship with my wife, the more I give, therefore, as it says, the more I get back in return. One, I'll grow as a person. I'm going to get to know myself better. I'm also going to get to know the other person better. So take this same example. It's the love language. If I am starting to get to know who my wife is by trying to figure out who she is as a person, trying to figure out what she admires, what she likes, what gets her up in the morning, my then relationship with my wife is going to be more heightened, more rich, more meaningful. We say the same thing with our relationship with God. The more I pray, one, it'll help me because it'll center me. I'll be more clear on what it is that I'm, as you said, what I'm doing on my day-to-day life. I'm going to be living a life with more intentionality, but also my relationship with God in turn will be more rich because I am now trying to have a relationship with this perfect being called God.
There it is.
And by me trying to have a relationship with this perfect being called God and know how does God work on a day-to-day basis as a perfect being, by me trying to have a connection, communication, a relationship with this perfect being, in turn, I'm going to start appreciating the perfection, quote unquote, that I have on my day-to-day life. All the gifts that God gives me on a day-to-day life. And in turn, I'm going to become a more actualized person.
Well, let me also synthesize that with the things that we just discussed earlier. So our current working definition, at least as I don't know if we fully agreed on it, but let's say we have. Our current working definition is trying to align yourself with the most perfect version of yourself, leading towards a more perfect version of yourself from birth to death, but in any given moment. And to relate it to relationships.
And there's only one perfect being, again, in this world.
Right. So as perfect as you can get.
Right.
But related to relationships, like you mentioned with your wife, you and your wife are at all times, hopefully, both present and aware of your own selves, working on becoming the most perfect version of your own selves alongside each other. And that takes a level of awareness of yourself, but it also takes a level of awareness of each other. Because as you're both on that journey, you both have to make these micro adjustments for yourselves to continue to align and continue to do that in parallel.
Amazing.
Right? Because it's possible that as she becomes a more perfect version of yourself and you're not paying attention to what that looks like for her, or vice versa, you could start becoming more perfect versions of yourselves, but slowly in drifting directions.
Correct.
Right?
And excellent.
And if you let go of that awareness, if you stop checking in with what does her perfect version look like, because that changes on a day-to-day, on a minute-by-minute basis sometimes, right? You get a phone call that changes the way you think about something, and now the perfect version of herself is different than it was a minute ago before that phone call.
Correct.
And if you're not tuned into that, how are you going to know that?
Amazing. Just to bring it back to the spiritual side of it, is that, again, if God is the only perfect being, and we're trying to aspire to have a relationship with this perfect being. So therefore, me as a finite individual have to have a relationship with an infinite individual. That infinite being called God is perfect. We as a finite being are imperfect. If we're going to have a relationship with this infinite being, we have to perfect ourselves as much as we can as a finite being. We believe in the good book says that if I am alone in this world, I am not going to be able to, by myself, have ultimate perfection. I need to, in a way, to have a soulmate, a person who is opposite me, who will be able to bring out the best in me. Now, at times, that is very challenging.
Of course. Growth is always challenging.
Growth is challenging. So somebody who is there, we call it in Hebrew, ezer kenegdo, a helper opposite you. Now this helper...
I'm going to write that on the bottom.
Yes,
Ezer kenegdo.
Ezer kenegdo. This helper who is opposite you is going to call you out on your stuff, is going to push you to be the best version of who you are. This person is going to tell you at times, take out the trash. This person at times might come off as nagging because this person might see you for who you are, and you with all your rationalizations, your blind spots, your selfish ways, your laziness, might not be pushing yourself to be the best version of who you are to connect to God.
Right.
So we believe that when you have a helper, an ezer kenegdo opposite you, who is challenging you to be the best version of yourself, that unit, as you described, will be a better unit as a whole together to get to that ultimate perfection of having that relationship with God. Because in a way, we are selfish beings. And in truth, we can't always do it by ourselves. So sometimes we don't want somebody who's going to nag us or who's going to be, and I'm not saying that you need to choose somebody who's going to nag you, but a real relationship with somebody who knows you, who cares about you, who loves you, at times is going to be difficult and challenging and hard because they're going to push you to be the best version of yourselves. So that means you have to be real with yourself. You have to be honest with yourself, and you have to say, ultimately, I have to get to that finish line to try to become a perfect being. And if I'm really self-actualized enough and self-aware enough, can that person who's opposite me, are they going to help me get to where I need to get to?
Let's talk about, you said this word earlier, and I think it's worth discussing, which is blind spots. I think blind spots, look, I've almost died. I was in a really bad motorcycle accident, and I find that I'm not really afraid of most things at this point because I've kind of faced the ultimate fear a little bit, and I've come out on the other side, and I've
call a spade a spade. You look death in the eye.
Yeah, and I feel like after being through that, I recognized that life can be full of fear, but it's also that fear, or the things that I think I fear, are also beautiful parts of living. Pain is not comfortable, but it's beautiful. It's a sign that I'm alive. You start to really love those little things. But the one thing that I would say I still fear is blind spots, because I hate this idea that there is something about myself that I just can't see. And I know I have them. I know I have blind spots. I know that there are things about me and about who I am that I don't always catch quickly. Like I'll behave a certain way and then look back and go, that wasn't good. And that feels like a blind spot to me. Or, I think there's other things that hold me back in my career as an entertainer. I'm very self-critical, perfectionist. I'm very people-pleasy, so sometimes I do everything I can, to make sure everyone else is comfortable, but in the same time, neglect myself. And these are things that I've become aware of, but they're still my blind spots, and there's probably more. I mean, I know there's more. What do you do about that? Because I very much fear blind spots because I think that they could lead to a delusion. They could offer me this false sense of security where I go, I'm all good, and I'm not all good. So how do you, I don't know if there's an answer for it, but how do you find those blind spots? How do you deal with them? How do you accept them? How do you celebrate them in a way that just become a part of you, and you catch them when you can? And it just feels like a thing that scares me. Even with my girlfriend, I worry that my blind spots could be something that is grating to her, and I don't want that.
So there was a lot there that you asked.
Yeah, I mean it's a whole nother episode. But let's touch on it. Let's just talk about blind spots for a bit, because I think it's a good
what is
part of perfection.
What is a blind spot? I'll answer it. A blind spot, I believe, is an opportunity for growth. A blind spot is an opportunity for growth.
But the definition implies that you don't know that you need to do that growth.
Okay.
I mean, sure, we all have opportunities for growth.
I think some of us know or can become more attuned to what our blind spots are. It could be inherently that we're not aware of our blind spots. And then hopefully through the relationships that you have in this world, you make yourself a good friend. You have a girlfriend.
I was just about to say, do you think that it is the duty of people in our lives, whether it's girlfriend or just friend, wife, whatever,
husband, spouse,
to tell us our blind spots?
For sure. If they are really a friend, because a lot of times,
but that could be difficult.
Okay,
that could be a really hard. But to constantly, to harp on someone's blind spots.
But Greg, again,
it could create an adversarial relationship. Is what I'm saying.
It could. Again, what is our purpose? Our purpose is to connect to God, to have a relationship with a perfect being, derive pleasure from this world. Now, are the blind spots that I have in this world inhibiting me from having that true connection to something greater? And most likely, those blind spots are. Yeah. Now, if I am close to you, Greg, I'm using you and me as an example.
I'd like to think.
Okay, I'm going to use you and me as an example. I care about you, Greg. We're going to have a deep, meaningful conversation right now.
For example, you care about me.
I care about you. I do care about you.
I know.
And if, God forbid, I noticed that you were doing something that was hindering your growth, hindering your connection, hindering your opportunity to get the most out of life, and I chose not to elude you of that or let you know, according to Judaism, I would be transgressing. Thou shalt love your brother as you love yourself. Meaning I would obviously want to know if I was tripping, stumbling, falling. But if I chose to hoard that piece of information and chose not to give you that piece of information, I then would be putting a stumbling block essentially in front of a blind person.
Let me get this
and
straight.
Therefore I would be transgressing, and I would not be doing a mitzvah. And in fact, I would be doing a sin. So Judaism says that if one has the responsibility to communicate that his or her friend is making a mistake, and I choose not to take part in that, I will be doing something very bad. Now, I have to be very delicate in my approach.
Honesty
and how
without tact is cruelty.
Correct. And if I do it in a way that would, let's say, I see that you're doing something really wrong, and I choose to say that you're doing something really wrong in the presence of 10 other people right here.
That wouldn't be great.
That would not be great. And in fact, it could hurt your feelings.
You'd be rude. You'd be a
I'd
jerk.
be rude. It would be really a problem. So what would I would have to do is I would have to pull you aside.
You text me quietly.
Greg,
hey, you got something in your teeth. Wait, but even that small. If I had something in my teeth and you saw it and didn't say anything, would that be a transgression? Or is there like degrees?
There are degrees.
Okay, but you wouldn't be sinning if you let some broccoli stay in my teeth.
But let's say I knew that you were doing something that like was really offensive. Again, come up with an example.
Right.
We can come up with
several
examples. But what I would do is I would get your attention. I'd be like, Greg, I love you. I care about you. Do you mind if I would pull you aside?
The criticism sandwich, right? Start with something nice.
Something nice. I love you. I care about you. I forgot who it is, but if you're going to say something negative, not negative, but something that is not always, you should start with 5 positives before you give 1 negative. Build them up.
5 positives.
5 positives.
I love it. By the end, you're like, and I think your shirt is nice, and you're pretty good at dancing. But the thing you said earlier was really messed up, dude.
How do you feel now?
Yeah, exactly. And then close with something nice. And your pants don't have wrinkles.
So, as Greg said, I would sandwich it with something positive. Then I would make sure that I would be like, by the way, can I share something with you that you might be unaware of? Would you want to hear it? And I would ask that person.
Well, I like that. Hey, I have something I want to share with you. Would you like that information? Because then if the person says no, that's on them.
That's on them.
They're choosing to not be closer to their perfect selves.
Right.
They're choosing that. And you've made your.
And I'm saying I've noticed something, and I care about you. I'm not doing this for my own personal benefit. I'm not doing this to aggrandize myself, and I'm not trying to like hurt you or seem as if I'm a better person. I really want to help you, and therefore I'm trying in a way to help you get closer to your ultimate purpose, your ultimate journey, your ultimate clarity in life, to try to perfect you so you can become aware of it.
Is this the same framework you would use for relationships? Because I think in a friend, if you and I setting, I think it's different than in a relationship. Because I'll say this, and the only reason I'm harping on this and bringing this up is because in my past relationships, I've definitely had, I've given power to my past significant others to give me that kind of criticism whenever they have it, because I want to grow. And I think that when you give that power to someone that is also supposed to be, a romantic partner and all of that other stuff, it becomes, they start to become almost like a therapist and and something that's less soft romantic. Romanticism is important. And if the other person is constantly pointing out your blind spots, it starts to become less that. Do you understand?
You're asking a very good question.
You can give away too much of that power to someone that sometimes needs to just be your cheerleader and doesn't always have to be your therapist.
Correct. And I would say this again, being married for 15 years.
That's what I was going to say. What's the framework of this in a marriage, in a romantic relationship where you're
what should be what I would say, and there needs to be a sense of formality. Even though I've been married for 15 years, and my wife, God bless her, she loves me, she cares about me.
Incredible woman.
She's an incredible woman. Thank you. And she calls me on my stuff.
Yeah.
But I would almost in a way say that it's really important that even though a couple has been married for 15 years, there should still be a level of formality and a level of permission, and say, you know what, honey, I love you, but I'm noticing that you're doing something that is potentially offending the people at the table that you're unaware of. Like, right. I want to pull you aside, not call you out in front of hundreds of people and tell you. It's to help and say, like, look, obviously I'm going to tell you,
right?
But I still want to, to some degree, ask you your permission. Like, since that I care about you deeply, I'm going to ask you, do you want to know what you're doing?
Right.
And I still think that people, in a way, they're almost like there's not always, but there's times of crossing of boundaries. The people get too close with one another and they just assume, oh, I can tell you at free will whatever you need to hear. And I think that relationships get into trouble sometimes because there's always a time and a place. And I respect you enough that you should have the choice whether or not you want to hear this or not.
And there's also there could also be a playful energy to it. I went to a bar with my girlfriend the other day, and there was a karaoke there, and I'm not going to say no to karaoke. So naturally. So I sang Georgia on My Mind, and there was like 4 people in that bar. It was like midnight. There was no pressure, no nothing. And then I came back, and she was like, not your best. And of course, for me, it was like, I suddenly felt kind of vulnerable. I was like, oh, wow, man, did I really suck it up? Like, because I thought I did okay. And she goes, no, it's okay. She was like, it's okay. You couldn't really hear yourself. It wasn't loud enough for you to hear, but you were definitely not on most of the time. And I was like, and for a second, it stung just like a little bit. And again, there was no pressure, no nothing. But I'm a perfectionist. And anytime I do anything performance related, I want to execute. I want to be the best. But I appreciate that she told me that, because what that does for me is it lets me know that, because she knew that wasn't going to feel good to hear that. But what it does for me is let me know that any other time when I come back to the table and she says, that was great, I know she meant it.
And correct. And let's say she kept on saying, you're great, and you actually weren't great that one time.
I wouldn't like that.
You wouldn't like it, and then you wouldn't grow, and then you would be status quo.
Would that also be a transgression?
Yes.
In the Jewish religion?
Yes.
So for her so if she told me I did something well when in fact she didn't believe
she's
that,
lying to you.
She's lying, right?
But
she's lying to help me.
Look, let's say you're in a relationship with somebody, and your spouse, because they don't want to hurt your feelings, chooses not to.
Yeah, where do white lies sit in all of this?
Okay, so thank you. That's where I was going with this, is that there's something in Judaism called shalom bayit. Shalom means peace. Bayit means house. Peace of the house. So we have to try our best to keep always peace in the house. Don't argue in front of the kids. Do certain things.
The Torah says that? The Torah's like, don't argue in front of the kids?
Try not to argue in front of the kids. Whether or not we are upholding this at all times, try to make sure that your wife calls on the phone. You pick up you interrupt your meeting and you say, excuse me, my wife is calling. I got to pick up the call right now. Because you want her to know that she's the most important thing in your life.
Right.
So that's part of the Shalom Bayit category. So another concept in Shalom Bayit is, what happens if your wife says, how's the soup? Do you like the soup?
Yeah,
is it good?
And if you don't like it.
And you don't like it, and you're like, it's great. It's amazing. How do I look in this dress? How do I look in the dress?
Yeah.
Now, the Torah tells you we should not train ourselves to lie at all. We shouldn't lie. But what happens if your wife asks you, how do I look in this dress? Are you supposed to tell her the truth?
But see,
or to uphold
I would.
Shalom,
I would.
peace, that you kind of create a white lie. So what does the Torah have to say?
Well, I also think that there's a way to answer that question, to still be honest, but not be rude, right? How do I look in this dress? You could say, oh, I don't know if that's the right vibe for where we're going. Or are you sure you want to do, what about this? To offer alternatives. Maybe this is because I'm dating an artist. For us, when it comes to like aesthetic or like image, she trusts my opinion when it comes to clothes. That's something I've earned. So, when she goes, what do you think of this dress with these shoes? I will be like, nah. And I just say, no, it doesn't work. Because she knows that it's not a reflection of her. She knows it's a reflection of, I don't think this outfit is right. And I think the reason for that is because I have been abundantly clear throughout our relationship at other times to express to her that I think she's beautiful.
There you go.
So that's the thing. She doesn't question whether or not she's beautiful. She questions whether or not the thing that she put on
means you're
works.
in a good relationship.
Right.
But sadly, there's a lot of relationships where people are not communicating to their spouse on a regular basis and are not affirming the relationship daily.
I think that's interesting. So essentially what you're saying is that it's easier. Sorry, I'm doing my putting it all together. So it's almost as if it's easier to reach perfection with your partner if you take time outside of the moments where those critiques would happen to reaffirm how important they are to you, which is why it's so important to constantly let your significant other know how beautiful they
Communication.
are, how smart they are.
Communication.
But in just a simple compliment here and there that is completely unprovoked, so that when it comes time to make some sort of statement about something that isn't quite right, they know it's coming from a good place.
If you're void
right.
of constant attention, affirmation, connection, then
those little adjustments are going to hurt.
Those little adjustments are going to hurt because it's going to feel like, well, the attention that you're giving me is negative.
Only negative.
It's not affirming our connection and our growth together. All I see is that you're criticizing me, and therefore I don't feel love from you.
Well, that's when nagging becomes a problem.
Correct.
When the only communication you have is an adjustment to perfection.
I'm trying to perfect you as a person,
as opposed to perfect us as a couple.
Correct. I want to control you. But again, this whole concept of where perfection gets dangerous is that I don't have control, real control, of my minute to minute, second to second, hour to hour lifetime. And you saw that by having a near-death experience on a motorcycle, that you were just going on with your day and your life flashed in front of you like that. And you wanted to control it. But what you learned is that you're not in control of anything.
No.
So you want to maintain control. You want to maintain a perfect state. And what you soon realize is that you're not in control and you can't maintain a perfect state. And what ended up coming from that? You had to learn a lot about yourself.
Go of that control.
And ultimately, God, if there is a God in this world, decided, you know what? You're not in control. And I want you to grow. And I want you to realize that nothing is perfect. Nothing is really worth being in control of. And I want you to surrender a little bit. And by you surrendering a little bit, you letting go of control, you, Greg Berman, might achieve your ultimate purpose more by not trying to be so in control of your day-to-day, minute-to-minute lifestyle. And that is our in Jewish tradition, in a way, that's what we're trying to aspire to have, which is very hard for many people to grasp. But there's this concept called emunah. Emunah means to have faith. And to have real emunah, faith, is to know that God has my back 24/7 all the time. And that I don't have to be like this and be hoarding and controlling and trying to put you in this box and trying to put this in this situation and this, and to know that, you know what, even if it doesn't go exactly the way I wanted, I am going to be okay. I'm going to be actually more than okay. I know that God still has my back, even though I'm not in control of this situation, because like you said with you and your girlfriend, when you tell her at that moment, you know what, this outfit doesn't work, she doesn't take that as a criticism. She knows that you have her back. Mm-hmm. She knows that you love her because you've constantly been giving to that relationship, that she can trust that you're going to be there by her side. If I'm constantly working on having a relationship with God, when he throws me a kick to my shin,
I know it's okay.
I know that it's okay because at that moment I needed that quote unquote kick to my shin, and I know that he's got my back even with the kick to my shin, and I'm not going to take it personally because he's been there for me. He opened my eyes. Right. If he opened my eyes this morning, it must mean that it's worth me living today.
Right. I mean, I think I think it's always good when we have, and this is something that I think would be good, is that when we have these grand philosophical discussions, because that's kind of what this is, right? We're talking about this very amorphous idea of perfection. I think it's good to sort of boil it down to some kind of actionable things that you could do, little things that could help benefit you to reach some of these philosophical ideas. And one of those things is, like we talked about earlier, is awareness. It takes an awareness and a presence in the moment to be able to notice a time in a relationship or in a friendship to give a beautiful little
Or a relationship with God.
Affirmation, right.
Prayer.
Hey, right.
I love you,
exactly.
God. I care about
Or
you.
I love you, girlfriend or friend. I just want to let you know that.
and how much you mean to me.
And I try to
and
do
how
that as
grateful
much
I
as
am.
possible, because it's almost like I had a teacher in high school who's a really influential person for me. He taught me pretty much everything I know about comedy and acting. And he taught me this really cool concept of earning pennies and spending pennies. And it's this idea that whenever you want to take a nice long beat so comedy is a very quick thing, right? You got to be quick, but sometimes it's good to take a nice slow beat to kind of have that pace. And in order to earn that slow beat, you got to go fast at other times. And it's this balance that he taught me. And I think this is the same balance that exists in life and in relationships. In order to earn yourself some criticism down the road and a time to point out a blind spot, a time to point out something, you have to earn that by giving compliments, doing warm things,
Being present.
giving a gift, being present, quality time,
Speaking the love languages, the 5 love languages.
Affirmation, whatever it might be. If you make a solid attempt to do that at a time when it's not being asked for either, I think that's important. I love sending a quick little affirmative text to someone, friend or girlfriend. Hey, just how you doing?
Thinking of you.
Hope you're doing well. Thinking of you. It creates a bond that later, if I need to deliver some hard information to that person
knows.
They know because I took time out of my day when they weren't even a part of my day to let
and
them
they
know
didn't
they're
ask
great.
for it, and you showed them how worthwhile they are in your day-to-day life.
And every time you do that, it's like, if we're going to use that analogy of two people trying to attain perfection in their own lives and a closeness to God, if that's how you want to think about it, if you're doing that with a life partner, someone you're going to spend the rest of your life with, every time you reach over with a nice little affirmative thing, you're just letting them know that they're moving in the right direction. Because I don't know if I'm attaining perfection. Every day I make a choice, whether good or bad. I think it's for the right thing, but I don't know that.
Right.
And it takes someone who knows you to be able to just give you a little message like, hey, you're doing great.
You're doing great. I appreciate you.
And that's a little connection that you've now created. And it creates a stronger bond between you as you're journeying towards perfection.
And by the way, when I say thank you, inherently, if I say thank you to you, in a way, it's almost like I owe you. In a way,
Right.
I owe you. I'm much obliged to you.
Right.
Obliged means like you did something nice for me. In a way, not that this has to be a transactional relationship, but I feel now a closeness to you because of something that you did for me.
Right.
And therefore, to checks and balance, I need to now balance it, or I feel close to you.
Right.
So in a way, when you...
But they have to be meaningful.
They have to be meaningful.
I think this city in particular, Los
Correct.
Angeles, it's full of thank yous. And on the other side of the spectrum, sorries. People will say sorry for anything and not mean it. And people will say thank you for anything and not mean it.
But when I really genuinely say thank you,
show
I'm
gratitude.
obliged to you. That means like I feel connected to you.
And
I want to repay you. And I want to be close to you.
And in reverse, show regret if you do something wrong.
Correct.
If I show up late to something and I say, hey, sorry, I was in traffic, that could feel like a real apology, or it could feel like a throwaway. And whenever I feel like I need to apologize, I've been accused before by people that, like, when I say sorry, that I'm not actually sorry. I'm just saying sorry because I want to end the negative conversation that we're having. And I can't say that that's not true. Sometimes I do that. Sometimes I'm like, I'll just say sorry because I don't want to keep talking about this thing, and I just want to move on. And so I apologize. And I understand that what they were communicating to me in that moment was not that they thought my sorry wasn't real, is that they felt like I didn't truly understand what I was apologizing for. So a sorry has to showcase that you understand what your apology, and the thank you in reverse has to be the same thing.
Correct.
It's not just thank you. It's thank you for
being empathetic.
Exactly.
Putting yourself in the other person and understanding. And when those thank yous and sorries really do mean something, it creates a stronger bond.
It's another connection
and
between
that's
two
what
people
ultimately
moving towards
bring
perfection.
Towards perfection.
which is, by the way, still not attainable. Let's make sure
No.
we
You try the best
say that
you can.
again.
You get there as much as you can. But that's what hopefully gets people out of bed in the morning, knowing that I'm doing something for a greater purpose. Because if I stop with me, I'm my own God. What happens when something bad happens to you and you're your own God? Wait a minute. I was supposed to be in control of this situation. The bursting of that bubble becomes so tragic for so many people. In a way, not to talk, again, I'm not an expert in this area, but what happens in Al-Anon, AA? What's the first step of AA, or the second step of AA? Is that in a way, you have to believe that there's a higher power and that you're not in control of everything that happens around you. And when somebody is able to, in a way, kind of give something up to something greater than themselves, in a way, it takes away a lot of the pressure. It takes away a lot of the expectation of how you have to show up. So in a way, if I know, you and I, let's say we're operating in a relationship, but we know that we're doing it to become better people, to have a better relationship with God, it takes away a lot of pressure from us, because we know that we're trying our best we can for a pursuit to have a good relationship with God. And sometimes we'll make mistakes, but I'm not trying to be God. I'm not trying to do it from an ego place. I'm trying to do it because I want to ultimately connect and be a better person.
Let me ask you this. You mentioned this earlier. If you are your own God, then, what do you do when you do something wrong? Do you forgive yourself? As you were saying that, I was thinking to myself, and I think I have a much higher capacity to forgive other people than myself. I think I am worse at forgiving myself than I am at forgiving other people.
You might have a God complex. You might think that you feel
that I should be perfect.
That you should be perfect, and that you're in control of really anything that comes.
That's interesting. I never thought
of
it
it
like that.
We're getting close.
No,
but I think
that.
people
You're
who
You're right. The fact that I can't forgive myself is not, that's not some sort of like, oh, look at me, I'm so altruistic. It's actually me believing that I don't deserve forgiveness because I should have been perfect, which is impossible.
Correct. So when somebody finally lets that go and realizes, like, I really am not in control.
I got to forgive myself.
Then you free up yourself.
But why is it? Why is it so much easier to forgive someone else than yourself? I think a lot of people struggle with that. Is it because they believe that they can attain that perfection?
To some degree.
But I don't believe that of other people.
But it also takes away a little bit of the vulnerability. When you're in control of something, you, in a way, are not being as vulnerable as when somebody who says, you know what, I'm imperfect, therefore they're setting themselves up to be in vulnerable situations, that they might fail or they might be something less than perfect. And it's much harder for somebody to show up and have to, like, show their face and be like, I messed up, or I might have messed up, and therefore you might not validate me as somebody who is perfect, and you think less of me potentially, when the reality is that actually I'm not perfect. I tried the best I could, and I showed up, and my intention was pure, and I wanted to have a connection with you. And you know what? At the end of the day, people will be like, hey man, I get it. But again, your background, your culture, where you've come from, you have been programmed to think that, like, okay, maybe for me to receive attention, to receive love, to receive admiration
is contingent
on perfection.
Actually, you know what? I think this is a great place to put a pin in it, because I think that we should have a whole conversation about your relationship with yourself. Okay. I think that some people, sure, relationships with other people is a very big part of it, but I think that before having a great relationship with someone else, you have to learn how to have a great relationship with yourself. And I think that this is something we should dive.
Is that episode 3?
Probably.
Okay.
Thank you so much for tuning in.
Thank you so much, guys. This was amazing.
This was incredible.
Was so much fun, Greg.
Such a good time.
Bye-bye.